The sun scorched Cedar Ridge like a branding iron pressed to bare skin, the kind of heat that made men curse the sky and cattle search for shade. Wade Thatcher swung down from his stallion in front of Morrison's general store, the air shimmering around him like a mirage. The town was half asleep in the noon blaze, a few lazy horses flicking their tails by the hitching posts, and dust curling around his boots as he walked. At 43, Wade was the kind of man people noticed, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with lines carved deep by years of ranch wind and loss. He had a voice like gravel dragged across steel and eyes the color of storm clouds. Once, those eyes had been warm, full of laughter. That was before Martha died 2 winters ago, leaving him alone with nothing but the creak of an empty rocking chair and a silence that stretched for miles. He pushed open the store door. The bell above gave a tired jingle. "Afternoon, Wade," Samuel Morrison greeted, wiping his hands on his apron. "Hot enough to fry eggs on a rock, huh?" Quote, "That it is," Wade said, his voice rough from dust and disuse. He moved through the store quickly, gathering what he needed: coffee, flour, salt, and the kind of quiet a man found in routine. Samuel watched him for a moment, then spoke what everyone in town had been whispering about. "Heard from Doc Peterson you're finally taking another wife. About time, if you don't mind me saying. A man like you needs an heir." Wade's jaw tightened. Folks had been offering him their opinion since the day Martha was buried. The town's widows and daughters had paraded by in freshly pressed dresses, all eager to be the one who softened the lonely rancher. He'd turned them all down. "Placed an advertisement back east," he said flatly. "Woman arrives on tomorrow's train." Samuel let out a low whistle. "Mail-order bride, huh? That's risky business. Never know what you're getting." Wade gave a small shrug. "I wrote what I wanted plain enough." He had. Each word of that letter measured and deliberate. Established rancher seeks young woman of good health and moral character for matrimony. Must be willing to work hard and bear children. Comfortable home and security provided. No poetry, no pretense, just truth. Of the many replies, one letter had stood out. It was written in fine, careful script on cream paper. Ruby Mae Dawson. She'd claimed to be 20, healthy, and eager for a new start. No photograph, but her words had painted a picture of youth and promise. Wade had imagined a shy, modest girl, stepping off the train with hope in her eyes. Maybe she'd fill the silence of the house. Maybe she'd give him a son. The next morning, the town gathered at the station. News of Wade Thatcher's bride had traveled fast. He stood tall at the edge of the platform, freshly shaved, hat cleaned, boots polished, his best shirt tucked in neat. The train's whistle cut through the air, and steam hissed around the iron wheels as it slowed to a stop. Passengers spilled out, families, drummers, miners, dusty travelers. Wade scanned the faces, searching for the girl who would change his life. And then he saw her. She stepped down from the passenger car in a dress the color of deep burgundy wine, the fabric clinging to curves that had no business belonging to a 20-year-old. Her dark hair caught hints of auburn in the sun, piled high in a style too fine for the frontier. Her gloved hands, her confident stride, the way every head turned as she walked, this was not the girl he'd imagined. Ruby Mae Dawson stopped in front of him, her chin lifted, her amber eyes steady on his. "Mr. Thatcher, I presume?" Her voice carried a soft southern drawl, sweet and dangerous all at once. Wade's gaze hardened. "You're not 20. Ruby's mouth curved in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And you're not the romantic poet your letter suggested. Seems we both stretch the truth." Whispers rippled through the onlookers. Wade felt their judgment prick his skin like thorns. He should turn around, walk away, let her board the next train east, but something in her tone, defiance wrapped in velvet, held him still. "The next train leaves in 3 days," he said finally. "I'll pay your lodging till then." Quote, "How generous," Ruby murmured, "but I didn't ride 2,000 miles to turn tail. You need a wife, Mr. Thatcher. I need a home. Shall we discuss terms or keep entertaining your neighbors?" Her boldness shocked him. Before he could reply, she handed him her carpetbag and brushed past. the scent of jasmine trailing behind her like sin. The ride to the ranch was silent. Ruby sat straight-backed beside him, taking in the vast Wyoming plains, golden grasses, distant mesas, endless sky. Wade gripped the reins tight, aware of her presence the way a man feels the heat of a fire too close. When they reached the rocking T, she took in the sight of the sprawling ranch house. "It's larger than I expected." "I'm a man of means," Wade said, dismounting, "which is why I expected honesty in return." Ruby stepped down gracefully, skirts whispering over the dirt. "And if I'd told the truth, 28 with a past, would you have answered my letter?" He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted her heavy trunk from the wagon. Whatever else she'd lied about, she'd come prepared to stay. Inside, the house was neat, but hollow. Thick wooden furniture, dust-coated shelves, the faint echo of a woman's touch long gone. Wade led her upstairs. "Your room," he said, opening the door. "Supper's at 6. We'll talk about your return ticket then." Ruby set her bag down and faced him squarely. "I'm not going back." Her voice wasn't pleading. It was steady, almost daring. Wade recognized that tone. He'd heard it in wild horses right before they broke, or refused to. "We'll see," he muttered, turning away. Supper was awkward. Maria, the housekeeper, had prepared beef and beans before leaving for her family. Ruby ate with appetite, elegant, even as she handled the simple food. "You can cook?" Wade asked, among other things. "And children?" he pressed. She froze for just a heartbeat. "I'm healthy enough." "That's not what I asked." She met his gaze. "You want guarantees, Mr. Thatcher? Life doesn't give those. Your first wife couldn't give you children. I'm not sure anyone could fill that empty chair in your heart, but I can try." Wade's fork hit the plate with a clatter. "You don't know anything about my marriage?" "No," Ruby said softly, "but I know grief when I see it." Later, after she'd gone upstairs, Wade poured whiskey and stood at the window. Outside, the prairie stretched under a full moon, quiet and endless. Through the glass, he could see her silhouette on the porch, her hair loosened from its pins, her face turned to the stars. She was too old, too bold, too much. And yet, for the first time in 2 years, Wade Thatcher felt something stir in the emptiness. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow, he'd send her away. But even as he said it, he knew he wouldn't. The rooster's crow broke the gray dawn, but Ruby Mae Dawson was already awake. She stared at the low ceiling of her small room, the faint scent of dust and lavender soap mixing in the air. 3 days had passed since her arrival, and Wade Thatcher had not mentioned her return ticket. That silence, to Ruby, was permission enough to stay. Outside, the world was waking. Horses whinnied in the corral. A ranch hand shouted to another. The rhythm of the land was different here, raw, demanding, but alive. Ruby slipped from bed and tied her hair back, pulling on a plain calico dress she'd found hanging in the wardrobe. It had belonged to Martha Thatcher once. She didn't let herself think about that too much. Her first attempt at ranch work had been a comedy of errors. She'd tried to milk a cow named Bessie, only to end up flat on her back in the dirt with a bruised tailbone and milk splashed across her dress. Tom Garrett, the old ranch hand, had found her there, cursing under her breath. "Ain't no shame in not knowin'," he'd said, helping her up with a grin. "Shame's in not learnin'." So Ruby learned. She learned to churn butter, bank the fire, and mend torn sleeves. Her soft hands blistered, then hardened. She burned the first few loaves of bread, but by the end of the week, Maria nodded in quiet approval. Through it all, Wade watched her from a distance. He appeared at meals, disappeared to the far pastures, and spoke little. But sometimes, Ruby caught him looking. When she struggled with the heavy water buckets, when she laughed with the hens, when she stood on the porch at sunset, the wind tugging at her skirts. On the 4th morning, she was up before sunrise, rolling biscuit dough when the kitchen door creaked. Wade stepped in, his shirt half-buttoned, hair damp from washing. The sight of him in the soft light made something twist in her stomach. "You're up early," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Ranch life doesn't wait for lazy habits," she replied without turning. "Coffee's ready." He poured a cup, and for a few moments they stood in silence. The kind that felt heavy but not unfriendly. Then Wade's gaze drifted to her hands. "Those blisters look bad. They'll toughen up." He said nothing more, just fetched a small tin from the pantry and placed it beside her. "Salve, chamomile and beeswax. Maria swears by it." It was a simple gesture, but Ruby's throat tightened. "Thank you," she murmured. Wade grunted and drank his coffee. The first sunlight spilled through the window, painting the kitchen gold. For the first time since arriving, Ruby thought maybe, just maybe, this place could become home. The peace didn't last. By mid-morning, Tom came riding up fast, dust trailing behind him. "Tracks by the creek?" he said. "Couple steers gone missing. Looks like they were driven off." Wade's jaw hardened. "Rustlers?" "Could be." Wade turned to the others. "Saddle up. We ride in 10 minutes. "I'm coming," Ruby said suddenly. The men stopped, staring. Wade's head snapped toward her. "Like hell you are. I can ride." "This isn't a picnic, woman. These men are dangerous." "Then you'll need every hand you've got," Ruby shot back. "Or do you plan to leave the ranch undefended while you chase ghosts?" Tom hid a grin. "She's got a point, boss. Someone ought to keep an eye here, in case the thieves double back." Wade exhaled sharply. "Fine, you stay. Keep the place running." He rode out minutes later with 3 men, the thunder of hooves fading into the hills. Ruby stood on the porch until the dust settled, then turned to the ranch. The work waited. Chickens to feed, fences to mend, meals to prepare. She threw herself into it, refusing to feel useless. Late in the afternoon, she was repairing a broken fence rail when she noticed a lone rider coming up the trail. Her first instinct was caution. The man was too well dressed for a ranch hand, his movements too deliberate. Ruby wiped her hands on her apron and met him at the gate. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "Name's Jack Holloway. I'm looking for Wade Thatcher. Heard he's got the best cattle in the territory." "Mr. Thatcher's out," Ruby replied evenly. "He'll be back by supper." "Well, ain't that a shame? Maybe I'll wait a spell." Something about his smile, too smooth, too knowing, put her on edge. But she nodded. "You can water your horse. I'll fetch a glass for you." When she returned, he was sitting easy on the porch steps, eyes wandering far too freely. "So you're the new Mrs. Thatcher," he said, accepting the drink. "Heard in town Wade finally took another wife. Gotta say, you don't look like the shy type folks expected." Ruby's lips tightened. "Gossip travels fast around here, especially when it's worth listening to." She set the pitcher down harder than necessary. "You said you wanted to talk business, Mr. Holloway, about cattle." "Sure did." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Thing is, I used to know Wade. Rode for him once. We had a disagreement, you might say. Funny thing, he never mentioned having a wife." Ruby's instincts screamed warning. "You'll have to ask him about that yourself." The sound of hooves saved her from answering further. Wade appeared over the ridge, tempest lathered with sweat, his men close behind. He saw Holloway instantly, and his face darkened like a storm coming in. "Jack," he said, swinging down, "didn't expect to see you here." "Just paying a friendly visit." Holloway smiled without warmth. "Your wife's been real hospitable." Wade's voice dropped low. "You don't have business here, not anymore." The air went tight. Ruby could feel the tension, sharp as a drawn blade. "Careful with your tone," Holloway warned. "You throwin' accusations again?" Quote, "Only one that fits," Wade said. "You're still rustling, Stock. Get off my land before I decide to finish what I should have done years ago." For a moment, it seemed Holloway might reach for his gun. Ruby's breath caught, her heart pounding. Then he laughed, a cruel, mirthless sound. "You always were a self-righteous bastard, Thatcher." His gaze flicked toward Ruby. "Can't say I blame you for finding comfort again, though. She's a fine piece of trouble. Be careful she doesn't burn your house down." He tipped his hat and rode off, dust curling behind him. Ruby stood frozen. "You knew him." Used to work for me, Wade said curtly. Caught him altering brands. Should have hanged him. But you didn't. Martha, my wife, asked me to spare him, said every man deserved a second chance. His voice softened. She believed mercy changed hearts. And did it? Ruby asked quietly. No, Wade said. It just makes fools of men. That night, supper was silent. The house felt smaller somehow, shadows gathering thick in the corners. When Ruby rose to clear the plates, Wade finally spoke. I should have sent you away the first day. She turned, surprised. Why didn't you? He looked at her, really looked. Because you remind me of her, not in looks. Martha was gentle. You're fire. But you both have a way of cutting through a man's armor. Ruby's throat tightened. And what do you want me to do with that, Wade? I don't know, he admitted. But I can't seem to ignore it. Outside, the coyotes began to sing, their cries rising and falling across the prairie. Ruby stood by the window, the silver moonlight painting her face soft and uncertain. Wade's reflection appeared beside hers in the glass, closer than she'd realized. Maybe I was wrong about you, he said quietly. Maybe you were, she whispered back. The space between them crackled with something dangerous, something that felt too much like hope. The storm rolled in before dawn, sweeping down from the mountains like a living thing. Lightning split the Wyoming sky, thunder rumbling across the plains, and rain came hard enough to rattle the windows of the rocking tea. Ruby stood in the kitchen, a shawl pulled tight over her shoulders, watching the downpour blur the world into gray. Wade had been gone since before first light. After the confrontation with Jack Holloway, he'd ridden out alone to check the south fence, ignoring her protests. He hadn't said where exactly he was headed. She'd watched him disappear into the storm and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. By noon, when he hadn't returned, Ruby's worry turned to dread. She saddled one of the smaller horses herself. Her skirt was soaked through within minutes, the rain cutting like needles as she pushed the mare down the muddy trail. The wind howled through the trees, and every flash of lightning showed the wild, open land stretching endlessly ahead. When she reached the south pasture, she saw the wreck of a fence, and beyond it, Wade's stallion limping near a shallow ditch. No sign of Wade. "Wade!" she shouted, her voice torn away by the wind. "Wade!" A faint groan answered. She ran toward the sound and found him half buried in the mud, pinned beneath a fallen fence beam. His shirt was torn, blood streaking one temple. "Don't you die on me," she whispered fiercely, dropping to her knees beside him. She tried to lift the beam, but it wouldn't budge. "Wade, can you hear me?" His eyes flickered open, unfocused. "Ruby, what are you doing out here?" "Saving your stubborn hide," she snapped. "Now hush and hold still." Using the rope from her saddle and every ounce of strength she had, she looped it around the beam, tied it to her horse, and urged the mare forward. The beam shifted just enough for Wade to drag himself free with a grimace. "Can you stand?" "Reckon so," he said, but when he tried, his leg buckled. She caught him, half carrying him to the horse. By the time they made it back to the house, both were shivering and covered in mud. Ruby hauled him inside, stripped off his soaked coat, and got a fire going. She cleaned the gash on his head, her hands trembling only when she thought he wasn't looking. "Reckless woman," Wade muttered as she wrapped his bandage. "Takes one to know one," she replied softly. He managed a faint smile. "You could have died out there. I wasn't about to sit here and wonder if you were coming back." For a long moment, their eyes met, the storm roaring outside, the fire crackling between them. Wade reached for her wrist. His hand was rough, calloused, but his touch was careful, almost reverent. "Why did you really come, Ruby?" he asked quietly. "It wasn't just for a home." She hesitated, her throat tight. "Because I had lost everything back east. My father died in debt. The man I loved married someone else, and I was tired of being pitied. I needed to start over, and when I read your letter, I thought maybe you needed to start over too." Wade's eyes softened. "And you thought a lie would buy you that chance?" I thought the truth wouldn't. She looked down. I know I deceived you, but what I feel now isn't a lie. He lifted her chin with his fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. And what do you feel? That I belong here, she whispered. With you. The words hung between them, fragile and real. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, but inside the only sound was their breathing. Wade leaned closer. You're a dangerous woman, Ruby Mae Dawson. She smiled faintly. And you're a hard man to love, Wade Thatcher. But it's a good thing neither of us scares easy. He kissed her then, slow, deep, the kind of kiss that felt like claiming back a life stolen by grief. When he finally pulled away, his forehead rested against hers. Days turned into weeks. Wade's injuries healed, and with them, the distance between them vanished. The ranch seemed brighter, the silence filled with laughter again. Ruby fit there as if she'd always belonged. Riding out with Wade, cooking beside Maria, tending calves in the spring thaw. Then one evening, as the sun sank red over the horizon, a rider approached. Tom came out of the barn first, rifle in hand. Ruby froze when she recognized the man. Jack Holloway. He dismounted slowly, his face tight. Came to set things right, he said, raising his hands. You were right, Wade. I did it. I took your steers. But I ain't running no more. Wade stepped onto the porch. Why now? 'Cause I'm tired, Holloway said. And maybe 'cause that woman of yours shamed me the other day, standing there with more grit than half the men I know. I figured maybe I could be better than what I've been. Wade studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You'll stand trial. If you run, I'll find you. I won't, Holloway said quietly. As the lawmen took him away the next morning, Ruby stood beside Wade, her hand brushing his. You did what your first wife wanted, she said softly. You gave mercy. He looked at her with a faint smile. No, Ruby, you did. She might have believed mercy changed hearts, but you proved it. That night, under the soft glow of the lantern, Wade took her hand. You never told me your favorite color, he said. She laughed, surprised. Why on earth does that matter? Because I plan to order fabric in town. Figure we'll need something special to make you a proper wedding dress. Her breath caught. Wade. He met her eyes. I don't want you to be a mail-order bride anymore. I want you to be my wife, for real. Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was steady. Then you'd better order enough fabric for a big skirt. I've got curves to fit. He laughed, an easy, full sound that hadn't touched the house in years, and pulled her into his arms. Outside, the rain had stopped, the stars bright over the quiet land. Wade Thatcher had sent for a young bride, but fate had sent him something far rarer. A woman he couldn't control and would never want to.